Okay, welcome everyone to a long piece of video in the current format. It's going to be chunked down for other purposes as well, but don't be put off by the length of the video. The first few minutes here will give a basic overview of what this is about and how it's intended to be used and why folks can just basically mute the audio probably after the first few minutes. We're actually leaving our main campsite for a recent Big Bend National Park bikepacking trip that we did end of January 2021. This is the Handled Draw campsite. And the footage is going to be the dash cam of a bikepacking loop that we put together for this weekend. And we're going to go into some details of how that loop works, but most of it will be just kind of background audio to this video. Now, we're on a short section, maybe 5 minutes of pavement or so. So I'm going to switch over to a different screen now that shows the loop that we're talking about. We'll talk about some of the details of it, but when we get back to the interesting features of the route itself, we'll switch back to the main video and then just do audio from that point on. Once we go back to the main video on the dirt roads or approaching the dirt roads, feel free to turn on the music and drown out my voice if you like. We're gonna talk about a bunch of different things just as background, but the main focus is the video itself. Now that said, let's kind of zoom on into where we're at in this loop. So this is our Handle Draw campsite. This is where we started, and we're proceeding north up the main park road. You know, we're probably in the video about a mile into it now. I did cut out about 5 minutes of pavement video, so after that it will just be real time for what was day one of the ride. That gives us about a 3-hour video in total, a little bit over 3 hours, and we're actually going to chunk that down separately for other intended purposes to 3 1-hour videos. But the basic formation of the loop itself, it's an 80-mile loop. We utilized it for 2 days of riding, basically 40 miles a day, and that's what this video is gonna be day one, the day one route. And we'll do a separate 3-hour-ish video for the day two route. And basically what we're doing is we're going from this Handle Draw campsite up the main park road at about mile 8 is where we turn onto dirt roads at Dagger Flats Road, catches Old Ore Road, winds through Old Ore Road, and around mile 37 rejoins pavement for the last 3 miles or so to the Rio Grande Village Campground. And that's where, for this trip, our supported riders spent the night, Saturday night. And then the next day they went out and did this loop back to that Handle Draw campsite. So that's the basic structure of what we're calling the Spinistry bikepacking loop. But you'll see there's a bunch of different campsites notated on this loop. And it is a loop, so you can start anywhere, end anywhere, chunk it down into whatever segments that you want to. Some people will want to try to do it in one go. Some people will want to break it down to 2 or 3, 4, maybe even 5 different segments, depending on what their fitness level is or how much they want to ride in a day or what else they want to do in addition to riding each day. I bring this up because for Club Spinistry members, all the details of this route and the camping and how to set up arrangements are going to be available to Club Spinistry members on a free access at your own convenience event. So that if you want to go down to Big Bend National Park and do this Spinistry loop, we'll give you all the tips on how to accomplish it, how to set up reservations for your campsites, where you can't reserve online, and what are really cool campsites that you can set up once you get there if possible, the ins and outs of all that. That'll be just we'll supply that as a web link in the description when that's ready to go, and you can get all the details on that if you're a Club Spinistry member. If you're not a Club Spinistry member, we're still going to give you a lot of really good information here. You're going to see the route itself, what it looks like. We'll talk about some of the ins and outs in the background audio of doing stuff at Big Bend National Park, how things work along those lines, things like that. Another thing that we're doing with this, we did put together a Club Spinistry training regimen for people to use. We actually, I mean, the video itself isn't just for Club Spinistry members. It's available to all, and basically a very fundamental, basic plan for people to get trained up for longer day rides and multi-day adventures and things like that. And it's the basic framework is ride every day you can, 60 minutes a day. And we encourage people to use smart trainers or rollers or a spin bike or whatever else if they're not able to actually. And we're turning on to Dagger Flats Road now. So this is our first dirt road section. Lost my place there, got distracted. So to use a video for supplemental encouragement, so to speak, if you're doing the indoor training, the indoor rider. I mean, obviously Zwift or what other software tools are out there are fantastic. Some people may not be on a smart trainer with that capability. In the past, I've done it myself where I will just put up a ride video, and while I was on the spin bike or the old exercise bike or the old dumb trainer or the rollers or whatever, just have something in front of me. I know lots of people watch movies or listen to whatever works for you. At least this way you can visualize somewhat what this route will be like. I can definitely assure you that the majesty does not come across in the video. You don't get a sense of the uphill or the downhill aspects of it, things like that. The ride itself isn't amazingly tough. It's not easy, don't get me wrong. But for anyone that's in fundamental fitness level for longer rides, I think most people can pull this off. And we talk about that a good bit in the training video that we have. We'll also have a link to that in the description. But we'll go into more detail for each of these segments about how that training approach might take. Again, if you don't want to listen to me ramble on about that stuff, fantastic. Now is the point to just go ahead and turn on your music in the background and watch the video if that's what you want to do. If you want to hear me talk about some of the details of Big Bend National Park in this route, the training plan, or other random Spinistry stuff we may come across along the way, feel free to listen in. But the main thing is just to get the visual up there. Now, I will kind of outline at this point, as we're making our way to Old Ore Road, what we're looking at and why we're looking at it. And I know people are going to go, well, this is just a dash cam video, Kevin. This is very true. I was doing the support vehicle for a couple of different groups for this bikepacking weekend. And what I'm doing now is I'm following the supported group that we're basically going clockwise on this loop. And I'm going out in front of them for the day to get roughly to a halfway point. And I was going to wait for those riders there and plan to come across the other riders that were completely self-supported going counterclockwise. And the idea would be all the riders will cross each other over the course of the day. I'll see all the riders from both groups. And basically the clockwise group is going to stay Saturday night where the counterclockwise group was staying Friday night. And the counterclockwise group will be staying at that handled draw Saturday night. And then the next day, they'll keep going in their respective directions, clockwise and counterclockwise, and go through the same process again, crossing each other's paths. I'll be somewhere near the midpoint, and we'll meet up. and make sure everyone's doing okay, hand out waters to whoever needs it or beers or whatever else. And that was the basic structure of the weekend, and I think it worked extremely well, to be perfectly honest with you. The loop itself, this Spinistry bikepacking loop at Big Bend National Park, I'm very, very pleased with. It's again, it's not easy, but it is not tear your legs off tough either. It, People are going to feel it at the end of the ride, and it probably, everybody that attempted this one did finish it. We didn't have any world-class athletes out there or anything like that, but we also didn't have anyone that just picked up the bike for the first time in a year and hopped on it for that weekend. That's not a realistic expectation. Now we're turning south onto Old Ore Road. And probably from this point on, we'll get actually closer. This will be fairly close for the most part. A little fast right now in the truck. But Old Ore Road, the road gets a little more primitive. It's really more of a Jeep road than the previous road, which was a improved dirt road that any vehicle could go on. It's pretty smooth at this point, but Old Ore does get rougher and more technical a little further in. Not crazy technical, but realistically where a bicycle is going to go about as fast most of the time as a four-wheel drive vehicle. So it'll be a fairly realistic representation of about the pace you would be riding on a bicycle at that point. The dash cam itself, it's a very convenient way to log all the footage. And outside of that short pavement section I took out, and a couple of, like when we stopped at the halfway point for everyone to meet up and things like that, I'm showing this end to end and at real speed. Again, the idea being, if you're watching this in front of you while you're doing the trainer or the rollers or whatever else, you can just visualize what it would be like to ride this scene. Now, this vehicle we're coming up on here, this was kind of interesting, and this should also give some perspective of what the road's like. This is a Lexus all-wheel drive, not a Jeep by any stretch of the imagination. Has street tires, not the greatest clearance. Right now, I'm double checking with the guy if he's familiar with what the road's like, and if his intention is to go all the way through. And he's asking, yeah, that's the plan. Can I make it? And I'm like, probably not. There's a couple spots you could likely run into clearance issues, but you're never going to get in a situation where you can't just turn around if it doesn't work for you. So I'm going off in front of him now, and he's going to keep doing it. And just as a point of reference, he did end up making it all the way through. And that was today's conditions as well. The conditions on these roads can change based on weather or whatever else might be going on. There's definitely a couple of slightly technical sections. Nothing that just absolutely requires a big tired high clearance dedicated four-wheel drive vehicle. But a regular Jeep four-wheel drive truck is probably preferred. Subarus and the like can probably make it unless it just happens to be a bad weather day or a bad road conditions day. Would definitely not suggest trying to do it in a Tesla or anything like that, though. So we're basically, let me see, we're almost 15 minutes into this video. Again, I'm going to overall do the full 3 hours, but I'm going to break it down into 1 hour chunks, with the idea being to support that training regimen that we were talking about. People can do it 1 hour at a time. And so I'll basically, with this first recording session, record the audio for the first hour and take a break for a while, maybe later today, maybe tomorrow. We are in the middle of Snow and Ice Apocalypse 2021. So I do have time available to me to do stuff like this. Basically, by the time we thaw out this week, I'll have all 3 hours of audio recorded for this. I'll probably upload the 3 hour version, and then I'll chop it into 3 separate 1 hour versions as well. That way, people that are following the training plan and need their indoor riding time, if they want to listen to us talking about more details on the training plan or more details of Big Bend National Park and this trip and this loop while they're riding the trainer or the rollers or whatever else, they can watch the video and listen to me drone on and on and on. I do want to touch on a couple things. Again, it's the dash cam. When I was recording this, it's just I just have the dash cam going all the time, just to record random images. The intent wasn't to record a full loop and upload it, but that's what we're going to do this time. Have some things on the dashboard. Realistically, they're going to be in the way till about an hour and a half into this video, if I remember correctly. Then that's basically when we stopped for the midpoint refuel spot, and I cleared the dash off then. But just in case anyone's asking, the papers on the right, that's essentially our Big Bend National Park's permit paperwork, which is pretty important for stuff like that. Again, Club Spinistry members, if you're interested in doing this trip, just sign up for the Club Spinistry member event, and we'll go over all the details of the whys and the wherefores of what paperwork you need under what circumstances and things like that. On the left, you actually see a solar light that I have the solar element out towards the facing the sun to recharge it. Those are actually pretty handy dandy for camping purposes. It's also a motion detector light. So that's what you see shaking around on the left there. So see the road's getting a little bit rougher here, and I can't remember particular. Oh yeah, that's why I'm stopping. There's a vehicle coming here. It's not a 2-lane wide road, so definitely when you're driving it, rules for off-road 4-wheel drive are essentially the same as mountain biking. Uphill has the right of way, and going in this direction, basically going north to south at Big Bend, you're overall going downhill. When you go south to north, you're overall going uphill. Very loose, very rough, but in this particular loop, definitely. So giving this vehicle the right of way so they can go on by. That said, out at Big Bend, you will have a lot of people on the more primitive roads that aren't necessarily regular 4-wheel drive or off-road types. So they may not necessarily be familiar with, air quotes here, the rules of the road. So just be patient. Everyone's out there to have a good time and enjoy what Mother Nature has to offer. This person goes on by, and we get going again. And it's probably a good time to talk a little more detail around the training plan itself and kind of how it works. And I'm checking on a timing reference here. The general idea of the training regimen itself, here's the fundamental format of it. The idea is if you ride 60 minutes a day, every day, or try your darndest to ride 60 minutes a day every day, after 12 weeks of that, most people are going to be fit enough to do a ride like this. Now, when I say a ride like this, I do want to qualify it. I'm not saying necessarily a bikepacking trip where you have 40 pounds of gear and maybe you don't bike pack on a regular basis. It's probably not the time to try that out. But if you were in a position to do a backcountry ride in Big Bend National Park for 40 miles, and using that because that's what this particular group did that day. You could probably pull that off after 12 weeks of this 60 minutes a day, every day. But I do want to qualify that because I know people are freaking out, going 60 minutes a day every day. That's impossible. I'm going to wear myself out. The idea is actually to ride at a pretty casual pace. You're not trying to tear your legs off. You're not trying to get into the red zone on your heart rate. Quite the opposite. You want to just kind of be on that threshold of, you don't even want to be breathing heavy where you can't speak. You just where, you're still conversational. If you're looking at it green, yellow, red, you want to kind of be in that upper green to lower yellow range, never going into the red. Now, this training plan isn't meant for competitive types. It's not meant for racing. It's not meant for people that are trying to set world records or anything like that. It's viable. We're not saying that that's not the way some people should train. This is getting a basic and fundamental fitness level, a base level that the idea is for you to always be in this zone. So anytime you have the opportunity to go on a long ride or have an adventure weekend or whatever else, it's nothing you have to just plan for months in advance and set aside a training. No, the idea is to always have the physical capability whenever the opportunity arises to do something like this. And this 60 minutes a day, every day, 12 weeks, most people will be there after that 12-week period. That also goes on the assumption that it's not people that are just coming in off the street for the first time and just learning how to ride a bike. People that are interested in these types of adventures and bike packing and longer rides and going to Big Bend National Park to ride their bike and things like that, most likely 99.938% of y'all are already riding a bicycle, at least on a somewhat regular basis. So the idea for most people, and there are exceptions to the rule, we'll touch on that probably in video 2, most people are already riding some. And we don't want you to take this training plan and replace what you're already doing. The idea is for you to absolutely augment what you're already doing. So if you're already every weekend doing a long ride on Saturday or Sunday, and maybe a fairly strenuous ride if you're riding with friends or something like that, and maybe another ride or two in the middle of the week, and maybe just because you're only riding two or three times a week, you're just really hammering it when you do ride. Fine, keep doing that. We're not telling you to change that aspect of it. What we're suggesting is all those other days that you're not riding, sort out a way that you can get at least 45 minutes of riding in each day, shooting for 60, and really not going over 90, generally speaking. Again, if you really get into this program and you establish this solid base and you do it for 6 months, 9 months, a year, you can start adding to that and augmenting it and taking things next level. But that gets into other things that you're probably starting to get into the realm of needing a coach to help you put together something very specific for your needs and capabilities and goals and things like that. But the reality is, if you're already out there riding 3 to 5 hours a week, 3 to 6 hours a week, and you can kind of do these things, but you're not sure of it, or you do that on a semi-regular basis, and then things go crazy at work, and you're off the bike for a few weeks, and you get back on. I get that. The idea is just to find a way to make yourself ride that 60 minutes a day, every day, at a fairly casual pace, at a pretty casual pace, with the understanding that things are always going to come up. Probably every week, but at least on a regular basis where you can't ride every day. The idea is to have at least 6 hours a week of regular riding at that pace. But here's also the other part of it that's so key to these types of adventures, particularly bike packing, or if you're looking to do the rat or something along those lines. What a lot of people don't get trained up for is the actual multi-day aspect of it, to be able to do these riding days back to back to back, or back to back to back to back to back to back to back. That's not so much about the overall fitness aspect of it. Is you have to understand how your body reacts to getting back on the bike the next day and the next day. You have to find out, quite frankly, when your saddle doesn't really fit properly for that type of riding, things like that. You have to understand that even though you really don't feel like getting on the bike that next day, not from being absolutely worn out, but just kind of like, I really don't want to ride today. I've done it for 14 days straight. I can take a day off. The point is to not schedule rest days, because life's going to make them happen anyway. So it's almost always the same for everyone. If you plan a rest day, here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your planned rest day, and something crazy in life's going to happen, and you're going to have 2 or 3 days off after that as well, for a broken down car, or a project that needs to be done at the house or at work, or a sick child or something like that. Just the way life works. So there's no need to plan for a rest day, even if you do end up riding day after day after day after day. If you get to that point where you are so physically tired that I just can't ride anymore, at that point, just go ahead and just still hop on the bike and just do the most casual, easy spin around the neighborhood where you're realistically just turning your legs. Most of the time, you're not going to get to that level, not with this type of plan. It's not committing yourself physically like that. What most people run into is the perception of, I don't feel like riding today. I don't want to ride again today. I've ridden 17 days in a row. I can take a day off. I get that completely. That's human nature, and everyone's going to feel that way. It's going to be real easy to say, I don't want to ride again. Here's the biggest thing this plan teaches you is, as negative as you were in your head before you threw your leg over the top tube and started pedaling the bike, 5 minutes into that ride, you're going to thank yourself. You're going to be going, I sure am glad I got on the bicycle today. I feel 1,000% better. And just riding your bike makes the day better for all of us. And let's just do a time check here. About 28 minutes into this video. Again, like I said, we're gonna try to do this one 60 minutes. So we kind of did 15 minutes ish of intro to this video and the video segments in the series. We did 15 minutes ish of the outline of the training plan. What we'll do now is we'll talk a little bit more about the generalities of this route and Big Bend National Park and the way some of the things work there. I'm not professing by any stretch of the imagination to be a Big Bend National Park expert. I know what I know, and I'm going to share as much of that practical knowledge as I can, and I'll learn other things down the road. One of the things I do know at this point, I've never been to Big Bend National Park prior to November of 2020. But since then, I've been there 3 times, and I'm most definitely looking forward to my next time. We do have another trip scheduled in November that I was able to reserve some group camping facilities. We were hoping to do another trip like this in March. And the way things are going still with COVID-19 and the virus and things like that, the camping access at Big Bend National Park is just overwhelmed right now, is the nuts and the bolts of it. Anything that's available for online reservation is booked out until middle of April as I'm recording this. And in April, my understanding is it starts getting a little, or considerably, depending on who you speak to. Some people say it might be a little bit too warm for riding bikes. Other people are saying it's like surface of the sun hot. You're going to die if you ride a bicycle in April. I'm guessing the truth is somewhere in the middle. Where we're at right now, we could schedule an April trip. There's reservable camping facilities available. I'm tossing that around in my head if we want to schedule an April trip or not. I'll probably still go down there myself for an individual trip of some sort, because there are other camping facilities in Big Bend National Park that you can basically just drive up and arrange anytime you show up. They have primitive campsites accessible by vehicle, usually four-wheel drive, high clearance vehicles, that you cannot reserve online. You can only reserve them at the visitor center, at the information centers, at the park, same day that you start your camping stay at those. And there's some fantastic sites that are available that way. But it would be technically not feasible to arrange group trips around that, because you don't know which sites are available. You don't know, you wouldn't know where to send people to meet or anything like that. So for an individual trip, those would work great. So that'll be part of that Club Spinistry information pack. Hey, if you want to camp at River Road, check out this campsite, and here's some routes you can do from that by yourself or with a couple buddies or something like that. So we'll share all of those types of details for the club members. And we'll probably do another trip or two like that in the next month or two before it gets too hot. And I might go ahead and book an April trip specifically intended as a motorized trip for Jeep and off-road and overlanders sort of thing, knowing that if it's too hot to ride a bike, you can probably still get by in an air-conditioned Jeep or something like that. So where this started, I am not a Big Bend National Park expert. I know what I know, and I'm happy to share that knowledge. And as I get more knowledge, I'm going to share more of it. This particular loop that we're using here, again, it's starts off in pavement, Dagger Flats Road, Old Ore Road, a little bit of pavement to the Rio Grande Village, back on the pavement to River Road, then Glen Springs Road. And then finally, pavement back to the Handle Draw main campsite. That's the way this is structured. The reality of it is this Old Ore Road segment that we're on currently, Old Ore Road's probably overall the toughest part of that from a road surface perspective. Everything else is at least somewhat more improved road than Old Ore Road is, but it's still not easy. It's not, it's not like well manicured and graded, dirt roads in North Texas or anything like that. There might be short stretches of it here or there, but like what we're looking at right now, this is probably rougher than 99% of the other dirt roads that are on the route. But that doesn't make them easy. There's still like a lot of loose gravel in them. There are some punchy climbs in the mix. There's sections with, jagged uphill rock face to go up and things like that. Just trying to paint a picture, but it's definitely not mountain biking, but it's also not gravel bike appropriate. You probably still want at least 2-inch tires, mountain bike tire size, but like a drop bar 29er, a Fargo, a Cutthroat, fantastic. A hardtail mountain bike, fantastic. Probably the sweet spot is probably the 2.3 to 2.6 inch tire size, not the True Plus, but the oversized mountain bike tire. Don't, but it could still be done on a gravel bike if that's all you have. If all you have is a gravel bike, probably don't want to do it on 32s. 38s might be a little iffy, but if you can do 40s to 45s on a gravel bike, you'll still ride it and you'll still have fun. You would probably just have more fun on something that could take a little bit bigger tire. But like, look at this section here. That just oozes fun right there, and it is. It's beautiful. It's extremely varied. And you're kind of seeing it at bicycle pace, or maybe even a little bit below. Like a bicycle would take this downhill a lot faster than I am in the truck right here. And if I can remember to, when I patch this all together, I just want to kind of give you, we're probably around in this mile 12 to 14 range on the map. I'm bringing the map up now. We'll switch to terrain view. We're probably somewhere in this range. I could look at those GPS coordinates or the longitude coordinates and nail it down specifically, but we're probably somewhere in that 12 to 13 mile range would be my guess. We definitely haven't gotten to this first campsite area, Mckinney Springs. And I don't know that we will get to it in this first hour. We might just get to Mckinney Springs. But just to give you a sense, that's about where we are on the loop. We'll go back to the video now. And probably from this point forward, this is probably more like what Old Ore Road is for most of the rest of the stretch of the road. And it's a nice long road. It's, not true double track, but it is double track-ish. It's definitely only one vehicle wide. Truck is good and pinstriped after a couple trips up and down Old Ore Road. But it's not gnarly technical by any stretch of the imagination. But man, it is a good ride. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. We'll talk about the park a little bit more and like what the camping facilities are like on a general basis. One thing to definitely keep in mind is probably the most disappointing is not the right word, but probably the thing I miss most about camping at Big Bend National Park is no campfires are allowed. You can't have open fires, wood fires of any kind there. Completely understandable. There, even though it is a desert, lots of dry vegetation there. So, and it's always windy. Always is relative, but every day it's going to be windy. There might be times of the day where the wind is calm. And I only think we had one short stretch where I would consider it extremely windy, but not dangerous or anything like that. Could even sleep through it with the tent flapping around. But it's wide open spaces, so wind is always a factor. So just another reason to not allow open fires, and particularly the primitive campsites at Big Bend. Those personally, I love those. Those are fantastic camping. They're primitive. That means there's no toilet facilities, there's no electrical hookup, there's no water or anything like that, and there's no fire rings because they don't allow fires. They all do have a bear box though, and bear boxes are pretty important at Big Bend National Park. No, I haven't seen a bear in the national park yet myself. I haven't been in the areas that are likely to have bears. but there's definitely bear activity in the area. Uh, there is all sorts of wildlife out there. Javelinas and coyotes are pretty thick. They definitely sauntered through our camp when we were staying at the primitive campsite. Uh, but when you're camping in the primitive campsites, you have the Chihuahuan Desert all to yourself, and it's particularly if you're there with some good friends to have some good conversation, and even though there's no campfire, it's a pretty darn good way to spend an evening, no doubt about that. There are some more traditional campground type campsites, and like I said, that's where we'll be ending up with day one on this ride is at the Rio Grande Village uh, campground. And that's a more traditional campsite type campground where the RVers park and everybody's crammed in close together. Still no electrical hookups or water hookups at the campsites or anything like that. Still no campfires allowed. I think I remember they did have grills so you could do a charcoal fire sort of thing. But there are toilet facilities there and water stations to fill water bottles. There Wi-Fi at the convenience store. There is a small convenience store there as well. So a little bit more traditional campsite. Personally, I didn't care for it a whole lot because all the campsites were so close together, and I just prefer having the desert to myself. But different strokes for different folks. I get that completely. Again, going back to the COVID restrictions, the at the traditional campgrounds, uh, the national park is only allowing 50% capacity right now, which you would think, hey, that's well, okay. At least they space the campsites out every other. No, that's not the way they're doing 50% capacity. What they're doing is they're shutting down loops and not allowing camping, inserting loops, and then putting everybody in the same loop. So everybody's going to be crammed next to each other because everything's booked, particularly at those campsites. I think those were booked until May, when the primitive ones started freeing up towards the end of March. The Rio Grande Village ones were mostly booked, at least all the weekends, and maybe through the summer for the weekends. Now that I think about it, you had some weekday stuff that was starting to open up in mid-May, but all the weekends were still booked out. Um, so again, another reason we're not able to duplicate this trip that we did the end of January. It's just the reality is our main campsite, primitive, the handle draw wet campsite, which I really loved, and that Rio Grande Village, which is kind of important for other reasons that we'll talk about when we're at the Rio Grande Village. Um, Neither of those is available until fall of 2021. Uh, so that makes it difficult to duplicate this specific trip. But again, there are literally dozens of campsites along the route, the loop itself. So if you pick different start points and midpoints, you can still make it work. The complication being that a lot of those primitive campsites, like on Old Ore Road, further in, we start coming across numerous campsites, but you can't access them in a regular, uh, family sedan or something like that. You need at least a high clearance vehicle. Probably four-wheel drive is recommended. Most people could probably do it in a regular pickup truck. Like I said, the guy in the Lexus all-wheel drive was able to do it, so probably a Subaru could do it. But you're not going to do it in your Honda Accord or whatever else. So that trying to put group outings together, that's a little bit of a limitation because it's kind of hard to say, well, we're all going to meet at McKinney Springs campsite, and if you don't have a four-wheel drive vehicle, tough luck. That doesn't make sense. So that was part of the appeal of the campsites we chose. They were both accessible by any vehicle type. Something to keep in mind if you're going to Big Bend, and if you plan to use a primitive campsite, you got to make sure you're able to access it. There are several of the primitive campsites that are fairly easily accessible from the main public roads. might still be a little bit of a dirt road or a dirt driveway or something like that that you're going to have to get involved with, but completely manageable. Again, for the Club Spinistry members, we'll go over those details. It's like, hey, if you don't have a high clearance vehicle, here's the primitive campsites that you should be able to access on your own. Again, Club Spinistry members, we're going to take care of you. But even if you're not a Club Spinistry member, you should be picking up a wealth of information from this video. Oh, look at this shot. I remember this part. This was pretty cool. Check out that view to the right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Remember a few weeks ago on one of the, I don't know if it was an overlanding forum or a Jeep page or whatever, some of us were discussing the different sections of Big Bend National Park and taking the Jeeps out there and stuff like that. And somebody made the comment that they didn't like Old Ore Road because there was no scenery. It's like, man, you must have been on a different Old Ore Road than I was, because this is some fantastic scenery here. And that's one of the things that's really cool about Old Ore. It does have quite the mix. Now, it's longer stretches, particularly on a bicycle, of what appears fairly similar, but you definitely go through several different and distinct zones on Old Ore. But all of Big Bend is that way. That's part of what's so cool about it. I mean, you go through things that look like just South Dakota Badlands, and then stuff that looks like national forest, pine forest in the mountains type stuff. Obviously, a lot of Chihuahuan desert, and the more time I spend in the desert, the more I'm falling in love with it. There's no doubt about that. I'm sure by this time everyone has heard how amazing the night skies are down there, and there is no doubt about that. One of the trips we took down to Big Bend was specifically for a meteor shower, and that was just simply phenomenal. The downside to that particular trip, that particular night, it was cold at night. The days were quite tolerable, but particularly the main meat night of the meteor shower. I mean, we took in a good hour and a half or 2 hours of meteors and those sights. And if it had been 15 degrees warmer, I probably would have stayed up all night. But it was one of those nights. It was just so cold, you just couldn't stay outside. And a big old campfire definitely would have made a difference on that. Not saying we were miserable. We still had a fantastic time, but it was just too cold to stay outside. But that was the night. That was December, and if I remember right, during the day, it got up to almost 70 degrees. So when you are down here, you do have to be able to cover a pretty wide variety of temperatures, and conditions can change on a dime down there. So that's something you do need to be prepared for. Bikepacking veterans and who've seen it all and done it all, you have the experience to back it up. You know what it takes. If you're newer to bikepacking, it might be more along the lines of, do it kind of like we did, where there's a support vehicle that's meeting people, or even better yet, and this would actually simplify the process a lot. Just pick one of the campsites and stay there for the whole weekend and make that a base camp where your vehicle's always there. So you've always, you've got all the clothes and food and tools and whatever you could ever need for the weekend. It's always in your vehicle. And you do short loops or out and back sections or something like that. There's plenty to see. even on a, air quotes, shorter ride, and from any section of the park. Again, particularly those primitive campsites, be one of those things. If any of those primitive sites are available that you can lock down, it's accessible with your vehicle, that would be my first suggestion. Just go ahead and book the site when you have a weekend, preferably a long weekend, but whatever works for you, and just go down there and check it out. Feel free to reach out to us if you have some questions about the general lay of the land. We'll share what we can. But I mean, this trip in particular, technically speaking, it was just a one weekend trip. We met up Friday evening, set up camp, got up Saturday morning, camped at the next spot, came back to our Friday night camp during the day Sunday, and some of the folks went home Sunday night. So, and most of us stuck around through Monday. But it's one of those, it could have been done on a 3-day weekend fairly easily, including drive time if you're coming from farther out. If you're coming from the DFW area, it's an 8 to 9 hour drive to Big Bend National Park. Make that your drive time Friday. The loop was short enough that if you left early Sunday morning, you'd be done by 3 or 4 o'clock, pack up, drive home. You're home by midnight. Particularly if there's 2 or 3 people in the car and you're swapping, driving duties. You could do it in a 3-day weekend that way. I don't recommend it. If you've got more time to spend in Big Bend, take advantage of it. But it's also one of those things. I can freely admit that, I mentioned earlier, it took until I was this many years old before I finally made it to Big Bend National Park. It's something I've been talking about since I was 7 years old, wanting to do. And up until 2020, it had always been one of those things. Well, I could do a Big Bend trip this week or this weekend, but we'll just go ahead and go to Colorado. We'll go ahead and go to New Mexico. We'll go ahead and go to Arkansas or whatever else. If Big Bend is on your to-do list and you haven't done it yet, and all you have is a 3-day weekend, take my word for it. Go ahead and book that campsite. Know you have a place to stay, and head that way. Look at your calendar right now. And again, Club Spinistry members will have a link in that Big Bend event page. Takes you right to the online booking. We'll have some suggested sites for the primitive stuff. The traditional campgrounds, like I said, the Rio Grande Village and Chisos Basin, and there's another one that's on the west side. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. That's not personally, that's not my preferred stuff. And realistically, it's probably not the stuff that's available to book until probably fall, as far as people that are interested in cycling are concerned. But the primitive sites, are starting to free up for March and definitely into April. March should still be good if you have a few days. April is kind of an iffy thing. I plan to go down there during April just to see the lay of the land. Might check out some of the more mountainous stuff then too, to see what the temperature difference is like. And who knows, maybe we'll even do a May or June trip. Again, just trying to get to know the lay of the land. Like I said, there's people that have told me that Big Bend in May and April, it's surface of the sun miserable. And then I've heard other people say, yeah, it's usually pretty good until June, unless you catch, a hot spell sort of thing. We'll see what it's like. And we'll also see what ways there might be to be able to adapt. Just like going up there in the winter, you got to be able to adapt if you have a cold night. Well, maybe you can go towards the early part of summer, even late spring, and go for 3 or 4 days, and maybe one day's scalding hot and the rest are okay. What's the best way to deal with a scalding hot day? it might just be as simple as setting up a tarp and spending that day in the shade. I don't know. That wouldn't be a bad way to spend a day at Big Bend National Park, to be perfectly honest with you. Do a quick time check here. We're 55 minutes into this one. We probably want to end up somewhere between 60 and 65 minutes to segment this first hour segment. And I'm looking at the video now. This might be the climb out of McKinney Springs. I wasn't looking that close. I think it is. I think that's what that pylon was for. This might be a really good stop point if it's what I think it is. For the four-wheel drive crowd, yeah, I think we just, if we're able to see over to the left, I think we can look down into that McKinney Springs campground. And we'll probably go ahead and end the video after this climb. I'll verify that that's exactly where we are and all that. And when we start up video 2, I'll highlight that McKinney Springs campground where it is in the mix of things. And for my truck, that hump right there, scrape, that's where it caught my skid plate this trip and last trip both. And yes, I have a dog going nuts. But see, how can they say there's no views? Look at that view. And actually, maybe this is the skid plate scraper right here. But yeah, this is the climb out of McKinney Springs. Down to the left is, I'm pretty sure, the McKinney Springs campground. And that was one of the spots where I thought the guy in the Lexus might have issues. And there's one other spot that this one was probably the tougher of the two. Again, not crazy difficult from a Jeep or four-wheel drive perspective. If you've ever done any real off-roading, nothing crazy difficult about that one at all. And next time I do it, I'm gonna see it. I think my line must be off just a touch because I'm just barely scraping the skid plate both times I've done it. So I'm gonna look at that one a little bit closer the next time I do it. Do one more quick time check. 57.5 minutes in. We're going to go ahead and take this to at least a full 60 minutes, take it around the bend, and then up this way a little bit, and we'll probably get close to a good stopping point there for this first hour segment. Again, the first time we upload the video, we're going to upload all 3 hours continuous. So if somebody just wants to see what the whole day is like, they can do the whole day in one go. Then we'll segment those roughly 3 hours. I think it was like 3 hours, 9 minutes total video time. We'll segment those so that people that are doing our 1 hour workouts will have right at least 60 minutes in each one to do their workout. And I'm thinking probably at the top of this crest right here will probably be a really good spot to go ahead and stop the commentary this time around for segment 1 of 3 for Big Bend Bikepacking Adventure on the Spinistry Loop. Day 1, north to south, Handle Draw Campground to Rio Grande Village Campground. And we're right at 59 minutes into this one now, by another minute here. Look how pretty this is. It's fantastic. It's gorgeous. I want to be there right now. I definitely want to be there right now because the weather here is pathetic. This is a good climb. This is fun stuff. Look at that. How can you not enjoy this? All right, we'll make it to the top of this climb. That'll be a good stopping point. Come on, push on through. If you're doing the workout, pedal, pedal, pedal. Make it to the top here. make it to the top. Let's make it to the crest. And we'll call it a session. And that's right at 1 hour there. And we're going to go ahead and stop.